Good morning and welcome to the State of the Property Market for UK Property Lawyers. And this is our 7th edition. And today I have great pleasure in welcoming an old friend of mine and colleague, Mr. Mike Day from Integra Property Services. Welcome, Mike.
Good morning, Richard. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invite.
That's okay. You will notice that Mike is nearly as old as I am, or maybe a little bit older. And in keeping with all of our guests in recent weeks, he has years and years of experience, but uniquely, or nearly uniquely anyway. Mike has worked on both sides of the divide. He is a very rare breed. He has worked both in estate agency for many years and provides consultancy services to them today. But he has also worked in law firms and even started a law firm, I believe. Mike, is that not right?
It is indeed. During my time as a director of one of the major corporates, we acquired a firm of solicitors, converted it to licensed conveyancers, and it still operates very successfully today. And I was a director there for a period of time.
Yeah. And just give the viewers and listeners an idea of what you do today in the estate agency world.
Well, this is now my 49th year in the industry. I started when I was 3. I've got around about 1,500 clients across the piece. I act as a quasi non-exec director, a mentor, advisor to businesses, but I do a lot of training. I do a lot of training in the areas of compliance, sales skills, and management training. So, and I'm involved with things like the Property Mark Trust, where I'm a director and trustee. So I have and agents together. So I'm doing quite a little bit of charitable work alongside my sort of fee-paying work.
Very good. So I think what we'd like to start with, obviously you're very close to the coalface of the property market, both in both sectors, certainly with the agents and seeing what's going on. So while we're not doing a stat show today, but what's your current take, Mike, on where the property market is today?
I would describe it as bobbling along at this moment in time. It's there's been a lot of talk over the last couple of years. One or two very loudmouth commentators in the industry sort of talking the market down. That we're
loudmouth Charlies, should we call them?
Far be it from me to name somebody. Talking the market down. You've got other sides talking it up. The reality is, it's pretty flat and bobbling along at a level. Clearly, the major issue in the sales market is affordability now. And that's the thing that's holding things back. But there is a market, but it's price sensitive, and affordability is a concern. We also, of course, now have we're in the run into a general election as we speak this morning, and invariably there's an element of people sitting on their hands and a little bit of wait and see.
So in our stat show that we did at the beginning of the month, and we've been running every month, and if you want to watch those people, every single month we will review the 20 EA data, which is absolutely fantastic, and 20 convey data to give us an idea of where the market is. But what we're seeing so far this year, Mike, is that the market's up about 18 or 19%, depending on the region you're in terms of properties coming to the market and properties selling. So that's really good on last year. I mean, last year was a bit of a nightmare. And it's well above the 2017, 18, 19 period, but obviously below those post-COVID years where it just boomed and went crazy. So some normalcy's returned. But you mentioned the election. In your experience, all 40 odd years of it, or wherever it is, how do elections, and how do you think this election, specifically at this time of year, because it's right in the buying season, isn't it? Normally we get these elections in November where things are a bit quieter. How do you think it might affect the next few weeks? And of course, it's not the only thing going on. We have got Euro football, and historically, that's been another reason for people to sit on their hands, hasn't it? We're going down the pub rather than viewing a house, sort of thing.
Well, I think when I was actually genuinely in the front line of estate agency, I think I had an excuse for every week of the year to cover why performance wasn't where it should be. I think, despite the fact, I don't think the general election in terms of the property market is having a huge impact at the moment, but invariably is a little bit of wait and see from people. There's just naturally, you can't turn your TV or radio on without being bombarded with whatever the latest soundbite is from whoever. There's a little bit more talk about housing within the manifestos, for example, of the parties, although quite frankly, there's hardly a cigarette paper to choose between one and the other, and a lot of it is rehashed sort of versions of what's already been there. So there's nothing terribly exciting being promised. There seems to be a race to see who can suggest that they're going to build the most houses. One party comes out, we're going to build 1.5 million, then the next one is 1.6, you know. Well, this is all laudable stuff, but there's not an awful lot of substance to it. I think one advantage of the general election this time is it's a pretty short running. It's happening on July the 4th.
5 weeks.
So it's pretty short. We haven't got months and months. Whereas we knew, and most commentators thought, that the general election was probably going to take place possibly in November this year.
Yep.
And so whilst it wouldn't have been announced until maybe September, the run into it would have been a lot longer. So I think short term, dampening down, but actually I think it'll be done, dusted, and move on fairly quickly.
And therefore, I think this is anecdotal. I get data from all our LFS customers, all our search customers, all sorts of people. And I think what we've seen in the last week or two, and this may not have fed through into the figures, just a slight dip in terms of houses coming on the market, deals being done, new instructions into law firms just this last week, which would be natural, wouldn't it? But it just means that people are slightly delaying their decision making, perhaps till after the election, and then they'll go on it.
And I can add a little bit more possibly to that anecdotally, because what my clients are, they are going and seeing properties to carry out market appraisals, valuations, but they're not coming to the market. So the number of properties that they're actually visiting, i.e. people who are clearly thinking about moving or whatever, that has not fallen.
No.
But the conversion to the ones that are actually committing to put into the market, that has reduced in the general election period. My guess is that once we've got it out of the way, some of that pent up activity will start to convert again.
Yeah, and we'll see a little dip, but matched by a little peak post that. The same always, I mean, I used to say exactly the same as you did about World Cups and Euros, that in the summer, people just were out, I'm not going to bother having that viewing today, I'm not going to do that, put my house on the market this week, let's get the football out of the way because I want to go down the pub. And people were...
Well, it'd be nice if we won.
Well, yeah, unlikely, but yeah. For those that don't know, both Mike and I have got big football allegiances, and my team always seems to lose to his. Well, I'm not having any of this anymore. It's got to stop. Anyway, moving on. So, in the news at the moment, in the conveyancing news and in estate agency press, in fact, I think Property Mark have jumped into this one in the last few days. There's much anger, much consternation about the length of time it takes for conveyancing transactions to complete. If you watch the Property Stats Show, Quinty Convey are now saying that as an average, and of course averages are by very nature an average, so there's shorter and there's longer, but the average across the country is now 16.3 weeks, which is a fair bit down on where it was at its worst, where we were at 21, 22 weeks, but it's not as good as it was back in our day, Mike, when it was about 12. So what's your view, Mike, on why it's so long, and what's the problem? What can we do about it? Because, I mean, Property Mark, I'll pop it up on screen. Let's just pop this up on screen. If our AV chaps will show you this, they've called it a Dickensian legal process as of yesterday, and it's slowing down transactions. Is it Dickensian, Mike? What can we do about it?
Well, there's certainly elements of it at Dickensian, although I believe most conveyancers now do have fax machines. But no, I'm not joking. But you talk about going back to a time that for years a transaction was a 3-month process, and as an estate agent, we would therefore turn our pipeline of business 4 times a year.
Yeah.
Now agents are turning that pipeline, if they're lucky, 3 times a year, and the same obviously applies to the conveyancers.
Do you
Sorry,
think?
go on.
Do you think what is the optimum time then? I mean, on average though, because I don't think people want to move in 2 or 3 weeks, do they? You think having time to plan your removal vans, having time to do all the things you need to do in the process, especially in a chain, do you think 12's optimum, or do you think it should be a bit shorter than that? What should we be aiming for?
I think we should be in a position to move as quickly as people want. But of course, everybody's circumstances are different. And of course, you've got chains, so you may have, one person at one part of a chain, who has reason for wanting to move in a certain time frame, somebody else less so. And that's always been the case. But again, going back to the word average, I certainly think we ought to be able to complete the vast majority of transactions within a 3-month time frame.
12
Of
weeks.
course, one of the big differences is going back, say, 20 years ago, is the onboarding process. So the onboarding process is significantly longer today than it was then, partly because of things like money laundering and whatever else.
Thanks for that, because if they come to Minerva, we can speed that up for them. That's
I know,
was that one for me to knock out the court there? Thank you.
I knew I was sort of that. You can send me the check in the post. But I think and on that point, and I know we'll develop into this as we talk this morning. The timing of when people get involved in the transaction and how much work they do at that stage to get the ball rolling is pretty key. And I've got a lot of experience and knowledge of how that can be improved, where solicitors and or not necessarily solicitors, conveyancers. The Property Mart report you just referred exclusively to the word solicitors. And as far as I'm concerned, of course there are solicitors in the process, but it's conveyancers. But no doubt in my mind that where the agent and the conveyancer are working almost as one in elements of the transaction and get the ball rolling earlier, that can shorten the transaction time quite dramatically.
Okay, well, we'll come back. We'll come up to that, because that leads to upfront information. But just going back to the 16.3 weeks, obviously I do agree entirely that with a lot of the comments on LinkedIn and online, that lawyers have a lot more to do today than they did 12 weeks ago. 20 years ago, sorry, 12 weeks. A lot more to do in terms of compliance. Christ, they're having to look at climate reports, they're having to look at source of funds reports, 6 months bank statements, they're having to deal with lenders and ever more difficult requirements that are being imposed on them. But isn't the problem just a lack of decent conveyancers today? We've all retired, or they've all retired, or we're close to retirement, aren't we?
Well, I think, and the same is, could be levelled at the estate agency market as well. I mean, a lot of my clients over the last 2 or 3 years have exited the market. These are guys and girls in their, 50s or whatever, have been in the industry 30, 40 years, highly experienced, running great businesses, and they've had the opportunity of exiting, and they've taken that opportunity. So it's there in both, let's call it both sides of the same divide. But I think, the number of people, the quality of those people is pretty key. And of course, the technology. There's been a lot of talk of technology. In theory, there's a lot more technology around today than there was 20 years ago. And people say, but it's not adding anything. Well, right. It is in some areas, but there's an awful lot more to do to join some of this stuff up, to share data. As you know, Richard, but the audience may not, I sit on the home buying and selling group and involved with some of the discussions and whatever around there. Things like the digital trust framework and whatever. The sharing and the use of some of this would, done properly, and the mandation of certain processes. Because at the moment, everybody can do things bluntly their own way, and that causes... It's become an adversarial, or even more of an adversarial process.
Yeah. So how do we get lawyers and agents to work together a little bit more collaboratively? I mean, I hear a lot of use of that word collaboration, but down on the ground, there's not a lot of collaboration going on. And of course, I think it leads us nicely into a little bit of debate I had with Sarah Keegan a couple of weeks ago about upfront information and the new TA6 form. What's your view on, so let me ask this in two ways. What's your view on whether lawyers and agents should be using the new TA6, which is a bit problematical, and when getting lawyers instructed when the house goes on the market? I mean, they're two slightly different issues,
Yep.
but they are very much interlinked.
Okay, well, let's take the second one first. Now, I'll jump around a little bit between them. But as you know, under consumer protection regulations, estate agents in particular have to provide a certain amount of information if it's material to people at the appropriate time in the transaction. Now, trading standards, God bless them, have now come out with this ABC structure where and the portals are now beginning to show certain information. That's going to create as many issues as it solves in many respects, because of course it doesn't go into the detail and whatever else. But there isn't no doubt that if you just purely look at it, the provision of more information up front is beneficial, because if somebody knows something before they commit, then they're going to find out anyway. So better that the thing gets sorted earlier than later. Yeah. The key, though, in my opinion, is getting the conveyancer instructed earlier. Okay, and in my past, as many people will know, I was a director of one of the largest corporates and we went into setting up a conveyancing operation at the time. Transactions were 13 weeks. We introduced a conveyancing panel. We had no move, no fee, fixed fees, and we gave those law firms an awful lot of business and locked a lot of people in. Now, we did it at the time largely to make money out of it, to make referral fee money, etc. The interesting byproduct was that at the time, we took our 13-week transaction average down to 10 weeks. And it was because the conveyancers opened a file at the same time we opened a file, and they got the ball rolling. They didn't just open a file and say, put it in abeyance until you found a buyer. They actually started doing, some of the preliminary work that they could do. That 3-week difference meant we turned our pipeline, instead of 4 times, we turned it 5 times a year. Now, when you're a multi-million pound business, that added multi-millions to the bottom line. Yep. Even if you're a small business, it's going to transform it.
And the same applies for lawyers, of course. It's the same pipeline, because they mainly get paid on completion, even if they're not no sale, no fee. We'll come back to that issue. But it means they're turning the pipeline 4 or 5 times. So opening your file is not a waste of time, even though there's going to be a percentage of cases that don't go anywhere. But what you're saying is, to be engaged at the front of the transaction is a great thing, not only for the agent, but for the lawyer as well.
Absolutely. I mean, we're all, I think we've got to realise that we are all on the same side here. You've got somebody who wants to sell a property. You've got somebody who wants to buy a property. We should be doing everything possible to make that happen, not putting unnecessary potential barriers in the way. I appreciate we've all got our jobs to do. Surveyors have got to obviously check the property over, perhaps. Lawyers have got to obviously make sure it's all okay, legal-wise, etc. I understand all of that. But the basic premise is that we want to get the thing from A to B as smoothly as possible. And the ability for people to work together, and the material information, upfront information, what a fantastic opportunity that presents for estate agents and conveyancers to bang their heads together a little bit and work together to find a commercially sensible solution to that, to both parties' benefit. I see the whole thing up for grabs. Fees, referral fees, material information, the whole thing is a melting pot now, and there will be people out there, certainly the ones I hopefully am advising, there will be people out there that find great solutions to this, that then demonstrate that they're performing better, which in turn will generate more business, because they will be able to demonstrate give the business to me and this happens, whereas if you leave it to chance with somebody else. So there are some tremendous commercial opportunities, as well as improving the well-being and mental health of everybody.
Yeah. I'm not going to name the names here, but we're currently working with a large Southwest-based estate agency group who've done exactly what you've just said. And what has absolutely shocked both them and me is that the conversion rate of them putting properties on the market and selling conveyancing has risen from something like 40% of vendors instructing their conveyancing to panel to something in the region of 80 to 90%. And wow, is that making a difference? It's actually causing a whole load of other problems, okay, in terms of the lawyers are going, whoa, what do we do with all this work, sort of thing. And of course, there'll be some lawyers somewhere in the equation missing out on that work, won't they? But from the agent's point of view, it's turning their heads. I mean, it's going with linking conveyancing referrals to the provision of upfront information is a game changer, if ever there was one. Views
Absolutely.
on that TA6?
I think the TA6 is a potentially complex document. I mean, just take it if you're an estate agent. Property Mark, who we've mentioned, Property Mark brought out a new PIQ.
Yes.
Okay, they brought it out before the Law Society brought out the new TA6.
They did.
This thing is 35 pages long.
Yep.
I don't think there's an estate agent in the country who's got the heart or whatever to run through that with the client. And estate agents in the main don't see this as their areas of expertise and whatever else. And so estate agents and trading standards are telling estate agents that they need to present facts, not interpretations and whatever of the information. So you tell somebody it's black or white or whatever it is, but you don't give an opinion or explain it or whatever. That's where caveat emptor, which was in danger of almost disappearing as a concept, actually comes back to the fore, in my view, because you provide the information as an agent, but you need a professional, whether it's a surveyor, a lawyer, or whatever, to provide the interpretation. That's where the commercial opportunity also comes in of getting involved early.
Yep. I mean,
so
the surveyor argument.
TA6 form, is it perfect? No.
No, the surveyor argument's a really good one, of course, because the agent instructs us, or the client instructs the surveyor to carry out an inspection of the property and use his expertise in providing the buyer with advice on the status of that property in the same way as the lawyer should be doing. So it's just getting the lawyers involved at an earlier stage. And I don't often praise the Law Society, but I'm going to praise the Law Society for being bold here and trying to put the lawyers back at the front of the transaction. I think that was their raison d'etre in doing what they've done, and giving the lawyers a chance to engage with the vendors when at the moment the bottom of the food chain. They're way down the line, once the memorandum of sale comes out, the transaction's been going on 3 months and suddenly we get the lawyers involved. Now we're putting the lawyers at the front. I think it's commendable. It might need some tweaks. There might be a few changes to the questions, but I think they've been brave and should be commended on it.
And I agree. Over the last 20 odd years or so, and a lot of your listeners and viewers may feel I've been partly responsible for this, given my sort of background in the industry, in driving conveyancers to the bottom of the food chain. They've done it themselves. Same way as surveyors ended up. The most professional people, it could be argued, in the process have ended up at the bottom of the food chain. And estate agents at the moment are still the catalyst for the process. If people are thinking of buying or moving, actually, I think the catalyst for the process now is actually the portals, because that's where people go to, they go there before they go to an agent now, whereas 25 years ago, of course, they didn't exist. But nevertheless, the agent is still generally the first port of call. How that agent then interacts with the other professionals and gets them engaged, and when they get them engaged, is the key.
So that brings us nicely to fees. both estate agency fees and lawyers' fees. Now, I saw my colleague and acquaintance Chris Watkin posted this week on LinkedIn that estate agency fees, if they had risen in line with inflation from 2006, would be around £4,000 at the moment, but they're actually only £3,000. So what he's saying is estate agents are getting paid less than they were in 2006 when you adjust for inflation. I haven't done the stats for solicitors. I don't think they exist, actually, what were lawyers charging in 2006. I'll have to pull off some old quotes. But they're certainly not getting paid enough, are they?
I think I think neither conveyancers or estate agents are getting paid enough relative to the role, and you've got obviously new entrants into the market over the last, say, 10 years. In the estate agency sector, the sort of particularly the online sort of very low fee, fixed fee up front, not performance related type sort of approaches, the referral fee issue between the two. And at the end of the day, what's happened is the message to consumers has been, it doesn't matter who you go to. They're all going to advertise on Rightmove and whatever else. They all do the same thing. There's no differentiation. Therefore, the only factor you sell on is price.
It is.
And there will always be weak people who sell on price. And that's what's happened.
But there are some good estate agency groups out there, aren't there? Some of the premium brands, the Fine and Countries, and some of the London brands, the Savills and Hamptons, who ignore pricing altogether and say, look, we are a premium brand, we can do a premium job, sell your house and get a good fee.
Yeah, I think one or two of those are in a sector of the market that is perhaps, they tend to be in the sort of middle to upper quartile of the marketplace. So there's that. But nevertheless, what they've got is a way of making sure that their clients understand the benefits of using their services. Yeah. And the whole thing of getting, an estate agent getting giving some potential customer client, 3 telephone numbers to phone 3 law firms up. Well, what does the customer do? Phones up and says, "What do you charge for doing this?" That's and the conveyancer says £1,000, £1,500, whatever it is, and that's all they've got. Okay, yeah. So whereas good estate agents identify what the needs are of the customer, of the client, and then major on how they solve that issue or solution. Conveyancers provide solutions. Somebody wants to move house.
Yeah.
Why don't we talk about that solution and how we achieve that solution rather than, we will do it 100 quid cheaper than the firm down the road?
Absolutely. Mike, one of the exercises that we do constantly is to mystery shop law firms and see how they quote and see what that process looks like. If anybody who's listening today wants to engage with us on that, more than happy to talk. The results are absolutely enlightening and not at all surprising, and they haven't changed in the last 20 years at all, in that most law firms simply make sure it's seen as a low-level job that they give to an assistant or a secretary, and they run through when they get an inquiry in for a quote, they run through that quote in a very robotic way. Yeah, it's £500 plus VAT, and it's your searches and your stamp duty, and the total price is $3,642. Right, you want me to send that out in email? Yeah, fine, bye. The whole process takes 2 minutes, and quite frankly is rubbish. But isn't that isn't that typical of lawyers and estate agents, where lawyers are terrible at selling, whereas agents are actually quite good at selling because that's what they do for a living?
I think agents are probably better, but there's an awful lot of agents that aren't a lot better than that. If you phoned up 10 agents, in a town and said, "What do you charge for selling a house?" 8 or 9 of them will give you a sort of a percentage figure, and you just say thanks very much and whatever. What people aren't doing is they're not asking enough questions. They're not getting to understand their clients, and if they knew what was driving, they don't even know why that customer is thinking of moving.
Yeah.
And that could be a major factor. What experiences have they had in the past? What were the things that concerned them last time that are obviously probably still in the back of their head this time? And how can I, as the conveyancer, or I as the agent, put your mind at rest, provide you with the peace of mind that I'm going to make sure that gets solved for you.
So let me ask you this: what would you, if you were running a law firm today, and you wanted to get your fees up, because this is the sort of advice our clients will want, what would you be saying to them to do? And you don't have to say use Minerva, by the way. Helps, but but what would you be saying them to do to win those customers at a higher fee?
Well, I think, at a very sort of basic fundamental level, when, and depends on how let's call it a lead, but, if I was working with local introducers like estate agents or brokers or whatever,
Yep.
whether I was on a referral fee basis or otherwise, I would be finding out, what we could do there. I would be using their resources to help sell. So, for example, I go back to 20 odd years ago when we set up our conveyancing operation. We didn't pass a lead to the conveyancers. We passed an instruction. Actually, it was our estate agency that sold the conveyancing to the customer. We knew what the fee was going to be because we'd agreed it all and whatever with the conveyancer. So we were able to present the features and benefits of that service to the customer. So the conveyancer ended up getting an instruction rather than having to go through the process you just described of having to I know they've got to prepare a quote and whatever, but we could do that. So that was one factor. But the other thing is, it's having the bottle. I nearly said another word then. Having the bottle to actually ask for a higher fee. There isn't anybody watching this video now who doesn't think they're worth more money than they're getting. Yet they don't ask.
And that's absolutely right. In the last month we've done over 100 mystery shops, and I'm going to name the firm. Only one firm, Weldon Montpellier Legal, asked us for the business. 1 out of 100. And you know what? We weren't just ringing random firms. We were ringing really good, well-known firms right across the board. Nobody sets it out. Nobody builds any rapport with us. No one's asked what we're doing, why we're moving. No one explained the legal process. Why? Isn't that basic stuff? And then at the most base level for salespeople, asking them whether they want to instruct. Are you happy with us? Would you like us to go ahead, sir? Madam? Nobody does it. It defies belief, really.
And what a fantastic opportunity for those firms that could change. What a fantastic opportunity. If 80% of your competition is not doing this, wow, you haven't got to change a great deal, have you, to suddenly go from being part of the sea of sameness to standing out as being absolutely bloody fantastic.
Yeah, well, that's part of the game that I play, and there are certainly some firms who are out there who are starting to grab this opportunity, and I think we will see over the coming months and years the number of conveyancing firms start to decrease as those who understand the process and understand what needs to be done grasp the nettle, and those that continue in their old ways of expecting the work to come through the door start to go by the wayside.
Well, of course, let me just jump in there, Richard, just to re-emphasise the point. Of course, if your turnover, your revenue, your conversion is not where it could be, and your income, therefore, is obviously reduced, then you understand then, I can't invest in training, I can't invest in systems, and the whole thing becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So somebody's got to break the cycle.
Yeah. So one of the arguments or discussions I had with Steve Hinchelwood last week was about this issue of no sale, no fee. Agents historically have worked on no sale, no fee. Lawyers, less so. Obviously, panel firms, who you've been used to, have had to adopt the no sale, no fee model. But there's a big resistance amongst many firms, and I understand it. I understand why there's a resistance to no sale, no fee. And just as to help guide this bit of the conversation, I've got a slide that if our IV guys could bring up the slide. This is the sale fall through rate, and you can see there that from again using 20-year data, that we can see that somewhere between, at an absolute low 6-9 months ago of about 19%, we're returning now to an average of about 22-23% of all jobs falling through. So the fear that lawyers have got is that they're not going to get paid for all that work on 23% of their transactions. Your sympathy is obviously there. No? Okay, so explain your view on no sale, no fee, and what is the view that lawyers could or should take on these things?
It is a commercial decision, but let's just talk about it, because I'm a believer in no move, no fee. I have been banging this drum for the last 20 or 25 years. When we set up our conveyancing scheme 25 years ago, the lawyers on our panel, no move, no fee, and a fixed fee. Okay. Now, that inevitably meant that there is an element of rough with the smooth. Okay. In so much you might get a case that, oh, bugger, whatever. In the same way as there is for an estate agent. They might be able to do a deal very quickly. Others cost them a fortune in market. There's a rough with a smooth. But that is quantifiable, and it is, you can work out what it needs to be. Now, if you're currently charging people for time or whatever, and you're getting a certain amount of business, and you know that if you go to no move, no fee, a percentage of your transactions are going to abort. Now, remember that a lot of those aborts, that transaction might abort, but your client still buys another property or sells the property to somebody else. So if there was 25% of transactions falling through, maybe 10% of that, only 15% of those disappear or whatever. Yeah. The rest of them actually still transact. It's just a different transaction. So a lot of the work that's been done wouldn't necessarily be wasted. Okay.
No.
Now, but it becomes a factor of price. If in your fee model you factored that in, so your fees account for the fact that you're going to lose 10% of your business or 20, whatever it is, what difference does it make? And the point that it does is, if you're a customer and somebody says to you, if you don't move, I won't charge you. And you talked about how can people sell their fees. Well, as opposed to, if we don't get you to move, we're still going to send you a nasty little bill. What a difference.
Yeah, I mean, of course, the psychology of that as well. If you're halfway through the transaction and the vendor pulls out and you're sat there as a buyer going, plumbing it, the vendor's now decided not to move. And the next thing that happens is a bill drops on your doorstep from your lawyer for £500 for half the fee. You're going, what? I'm not doing this again. And it's either way, it's psychologically bad, isn't it? It's not a nice thing to happen, or for the lawyer to have to deliver.
And what a positive message. So let's talk about go back to this person handling the quote, the lead, if that's what's happening. To be able to say, we're so confident that we can do a damn good job for you that we won't charge you unless it happens. Oh, I'll have some of that, please.
Yeah, it's an easy sell. And the vast majority of lawyers don't do no sale, no fee. And if they want £1,000 a transaction, which is about where it is today, it wouldn't be a big deal to charge £1,200-1,300 a transaction. Do it on a no sale, no fee basis, and you still end up in the same position, don't you?
Well, of course you do. And also, I think we need to look at this in the round a little bit, because we're talking about a certain amount of the business. Obviously, you've got law firms that get business direct into the law firm, so that's fine. But you do have law firms taking their business via introducers in terms of estate agents, brokers and whatever, where they may be paying a referral fee. Now, as far as I'm concerned, it's a pot. And it may well be that as a law firm, let's say they're paying out a couple of £100 for an introduction from an agent. Okay, it may well be to say, look, I'm prepared to move to a no move, no fee model, but I'm not going to pay you £200 on that basis. I'm only going to pay you £100. I'm talking forget the figures. It's the principle of what I'm saying is it's a negotiation to come up with something that sets you aside in the marketplace. Yep. What customers want is security. They want peace of mind of knowing that the job, they're not buying a donkey or something when they thought they were buying a horse. They want the peace of mind, but the certainty of knowing where their costs are and all the other bits and pieces. That's why people use, in the main, professionals. Why does somebody use somebody to manage their property when they're renting it? Because that managing agent is going to look after their interests. It's the same here.
Do you think this is to do with the fact that a lot of law firms are not run by conveyancers? They're run by, in conveyancing, seen as sort of like the dirty end of the business, really. They're run by commercial people who went to law school, didn't go in thinking they went, going to be a conveyancer. They wanted to be commercial property lawyers or buying and selling businesses and earning £300-400 an hour and getting paid for every penny of it, and there was no such thing as no win, no fee, and therefore they find it hard to then reconcile that with the conveyancing department that's not getting those fees up front. I don't know.
Well, I think that, in both parts, all parts of the business, there's solicitors, generally quite, technical people, competent technical people, but they're, as you said earlier, not necessarily salespeople, and actually not necessarily business people. And the same true in estate agency and surveyors and everybody else. Now, how much training, if I was to become a licensed conveyancer or God forbid a solicitor, how much training would I get on running a business?
Not as much as you should have. I think that's the probably answer.
How much training would I get on selling my services?
Almost nil, I would suspect.
Now, clearly the concentration needs to be on, knowing all the technical sort of aspects and the legal aspects and whatever else. But alongside that, one needs to, we're operating in a commercial world. We're operating in a world where we've got customer has a choice. Unfortunately, the customer at the moment doesn't realise what choice they have, hence the fact they just look at the fee. So unless they see the differentiation, and therefore unless the firms, conveyancers, agents or whoever, we could be having the same conversation in 10 years' time around fees.
I suspect, I'm afraid, that we will be having. Well, no, I can absolutely guarantee you
I
we won't be having me because I'll be retired as well. Mike, that has been fantastic. We've done 45 minutes. I think we've covered a lot of topics there. Thank you very much for your time today. Going back onto far more important things, I am glad to see that Leeds will be taking 6 points off Watford this season.
Well, I'm glad to see that we're giving you the opportunity and that you didn't go up last.
Thank you for that. Yeah. Well, maybe you won't next year. You're flirting with relegation. Anyway, good luck. I know you're always out watching Wishbone Ash. We can see all those Wishbone Ash posters in the background and F1. And I look forward to a summer of glorious sport that we can all watch together in the Euros and the cricket and God knows what else, the tennis and everything that I know we enjoy together. So thank you very much for your time, Mike. I look forward to seeing you on the Stat Show again in the new year. And thank you very much for everyone who's watching today. And we'll be back with you in 2 weeks' time with, I believe, another estate agent who will be giving his views on the state of the property market. So I look forward to seeing you all, and thank you and goodbye.